Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for coming to today's talk. I'm Susan Yu, a volunteer of today's talk. Before enjoying today's talk, please make sure that your cell phones have been turned off or switched to silent mode. Today's talk will be given by Raymond from Australia. Michael has been in the international hotel business since 1968. He did all his training with the Intercontinental Hotels Group, commencing in his hometown of Melbourne, Australia. Michael has been a board member of the Tahiti Tourist Bureau and the New Caledonia Tourist Authority. He has been chairman of the Club Visitor and Tourist Development Group and chairman of the Tourism Advisory Council for the University of the South Pacific. Michael and his family have lived in over 10 countries and visited over 60. Michael wishes to share his personal and professional journey, highlighting some of the more challenging times and incidents, as well as some of the more humorous encounters in their diverse lives. Please give him a big hand.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to come and have a chat and talk a little bit about my journeys and life here in Gwangju running a hotel. As was said at the introduction, I'm from Australia. I was born in Melbourne and spent all my young years in Victoria. We used to grow tomatoes for the Heinz company, H.J. Heinz, 57 varieties. I remember it since I was a young boy. And we spent many years in a semi-provincial city called Geelong, which is about an hour's drive from Melbourne. Throughout my young days, I came from a very quiet family. I have an elder sister and mother and father. And so my home life was actually quite quiet. And I played a lot of sport, Australian sport, which was typically Australian football and cricket. Went to school, and I finally got thrown out of school because I got caught ringing the school bell at 2 o'clock in the morning one day. So they said they didn't want me there anymore. So I ended up at another school in the city. And I actually never finished what would be known today as my high school. I never went to university. I like to think that I went to the University of Life. But what did happen to me as a young man, we had friends who had a hotel in a seaside town. And I used to go down there for holidays. And they had a son who was about my age. And I was always fascinated by the fact that they had all these people around at their place, drinking beer and having fun. And it just somehow captured my imagination. And I think that's probably at around 15 when some seeds were planted in my head about the hospitality business. I'm not sure, but I think that's when it happened. And as I grew older, I actually met a Prussian gentleman in Melbourne. And he had a restaurant called the South Seas Restaurant in the middle of Melbourne. I remember it very clearly because he used to have these baby crocodiles in a pond in the middle of the city. And he was a lovely man. And so I went to him one day and I said to him that I wanted to be in his business. And I knew that if I didn't have a university degree that I had to do something else that was very serious. Because I didn't want to sell shoes for the rest of my life. So he helped me a great deal, and I started work at the Intercontinental Hotel in Melbourne called the Southern Cross. And I spent all my formative years in that hotel, and I started there in 1968. And they put me on a trainee manager's course. And so I ended up working in all these various departments in the hotel. And hotels are very departmentalized. You have housekeeping, you have restaurants, you have the kitchen, you have finance, you have front office, and so So I trained right throughout. I was a bellman, I was a housemaid. I didn't wear a dress, but I was a housemaid. We had to make 18 rooms a day from start to finish. And then one day they said to me that we're going to make you a duty manager. And so that was a job that had all care but very little responsibility. And you sort of ran the hotel in the absence of the general manager. So I did that for a year. And an opportunity came up to transfer to New Zealand, which a colleague of mine turned down. He said, no, you didn't want to leave Melbourne. So I took it. So in 1974, I left Australia. And that began my journey around the globe. And I lived in New Zealand for 2 years in Auckland, and knew nobody. Went to a city where I knew no one. And after 6 months I had some friends, and we ended up after a couple of years having a wonderful time in this great city of the sales, they call it, called Auckland. And I was the rooms division manager, which meant that I was in charge of all of the front desk. I was in charge of the housekeeping department. And that was back in the days when there was no computers, so everything was done manually. Which is still not a bad way to do things, I think. But anyway. And after that, I was transferred back to Melbourne. And something very interesting in my life happened. I got a phone call from a friend of mine in Auckland, and he said to me that this very big travel company based out of America in Los Angeles was looking for someone to take 2 American tour groups for one trip for 14 days and one trip for 32 days. And would I be interested in being the tour escort for these 2 groups? So I said, well, where are they going to go? He said, well, the first one's going to go around New Zealand for 14 days. And the second one, the second trip, I would take this group from New Zealand back to Tahiti, not Haiti, Tahiti. And I would wait in Tahiti for 3 days. I'd pick up another group, take them around Tahiti, down to New Zealand, Australia, Fiji, and then take them all the way back to America. And I thought, well, I've never been to Tahiti before, I've never been to Fiji before, I've never been to America before, why wouldn't I do this? I'm going to travel and get paid for it. So I said yes. And I did those trips, and I remember, as a point of reference perhaps for some people, I did that trip, and during that trip in New Zealand with those people for 14 days, Jimmy Carter was voted, elected as President of America. So that would have been 1976 or 1977, I think. And I went and visited Tahiti and Fiji, Australia, and so forth. But I went back to America. I'd never been to America before. And I went to the offices of this travel company. And I took my documents that I had to take back to the people, and they gave me the money that they owed me for the trip. And I'd actually been responsible for selling opals in Melbourne. And I remember the opal company gave me a commission check for $3,000. And I'd never had that much money in my hand at one time in my life before. So I'd spent nothing. I had about $6,000 in my pocket from pay and so forth. And I was going into the office of the Vice President of this big travel corporation. It's called Club Univ Tours on Wilshire Boulevard. And he said, thank you very much for doing the 2 tours. I said, well, thank you very much for letting me. I want a job, permanently, because this was great fun. And he said, do you now? And he said, what languages do you speak? And I said, at that time I only spoke English. And he said, where have you travelled? And I said, just where I've come from. You know that. And And he said, "You want to work with us permanently, do you?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, "Well, as a matter of fact, we sent a survey out on the first tour because we were worried because we'd never met you before and we'd never heard of you, but you were recommended by someone." And he said those comments came back very positive. So, "Okay, we'll give you a job." And he pulled out this big book. I'll never forget it. It was like a huge big Bible. And he opened it up and he started turning pages. He said to me, "You tired?" And I said, "No." "Good." He said, "Have you ever been to New Orleans?" I said, "No." He said, "Well, you're going to go on the Mississippi Queen down the Mississippi. And you're going to take Americans on a paddle steamer through Natchez and Vicksburg. What do you think about that?" I said, "Sounds great." He said, "You come back here after 10 days. He said, "Then have you ever been to South America?" I said, "No, I've never been to South America." So he said, "You better go down to South America and see what that's like." So I did this. I was going to do this 22-day tour to South America through Colombia, Brazil, Iguazu, Buenos Aires, back up to Lima, Cusco, Machu Picchu, and I think that time we went to Ecuador as well. And then he said, "Well, you better go back down to the South Pacific and tell your family where you are, so you can go back to Australia and do one of those tours again." And so, for the next 3 years, I travelled 300 days a year all over the world, taking tourists. And the reason I did it was because I wanted to see the world and get paid for it. But I also thought it would be fantastic if I was really going to be in the hotel business for the long term, that it would be great to be a guest in a hotel and see what life is like on the other side of the counter. And so and we used to stay in very luxurious hotels all over the world. So I had this fantastic travel experience throughout Asia, South America, North America, Europe. I used to do 22-day round the world tours. Go around that way and go around this way. And it was on one of those tours in India that I met my wife. And we were in a city called Agra, where the Taj Mahal is. And a guy I know, or knew at the hotel we stayed at, he was the director of sales. And I always used to meet him for a drink when I went there. And this particular night he didn't turn up. And so I thought, okay, he's got something better to do, which he did. And so I went to bed because I'd had a long day and I had a long day the next day. And about 11 o'clock at night the phone rang. You probably know India's a very hot place, so when you're comfortable in bed and you're cool and sleepy, it's a nice place to be. So he rang and he said, "Where are you?" And I said, "Well, I'm in bed. We were supposed to meet an hour and a half ago." And he said, "Oh, no. He said, "It's my birthday." He said, "You've got to get up, you've got to come over. We're having a big party." And I said, "No, too late." So he said, "No, you've got to come over, and there's people I want you to meet, and we're having a great time. It's my birthday." So I said, "Okay, I'll come over." And I was actually lying. I didn't want to move. I wasn't going to go anywhere. So I put my head back on the pillow, and then curiosity got the better of me. So I jumped out of bed and got dressed and went straight over to his party. And there wasn't a party at all. There was him and a girl. And he was stuck because she told him that he was a naughty boy. Cut a long story short, that lady was a French lady who I met for the first time. And we corresponded, and she was travelling through India. And 6 months later, she was my wife. And we got married in the Merced Criminal Court in California by Judge Sharrow. And my two roommates from LA came up and witnessed the wedding. And I think the judge probably thought our marriage was going to last about 6 weeks. So if he was alive today, I'd love to go back and see him. And so we got married. We got married in that civil ceremony. And then we got married in a church in France with her parents about 6 months later. and we moved to San Francisco. And during that time, we had decided that me travelling 300 days a year around the world was not really a good idea when you're married. So I stopped, and I got a position in North America as the Director of Marketing for a Tahitian-based hotel company. And I didn't know at the time, but I was actually about to start a very long relationship with that company and the owners of that hotel. And so I used to market Tahiti and the hotel Bora Bora and Hotel Tahara in Tahiti all over the world, in France, Europe and so forth. And had a great time. And then in about 1980, 81, I got a phone call from Intercontinental Hotels to go back and join them. And they wanted me to do an opening in Saudi Arabia. And I'd never done a hotel opening before. And so I left my position in San Francisco and I moved to Greece, Athens in Greece. And there I did all the pre-opening for this big Intercontinental Hotel in Jeddah in Saudi Arabia. And that's where I learned how to make wine in 27 days. Anybody who wants a recipe how to make wine in 27 days, I can give it to you. And it was an amazing experience living in a country like Saudi Arabia. And true to its form at the end, 40 days before we were due to open the hotel, the king bought it to use it as a guest palace. So we all got kicked out. And so I had to move to Singapore and open another Intercontinental Hotel in Singapore. And our life from those days as a married couple has really been one constant stream of travelling, moving to different countries. And as the introduction suggested, we've lived actually in 11 countries and raised 2 young men who are now married back in Australia. And I'm now a grandfather, so I'm leaving for Australia tomorrow to celebrate the first birthday of my grandson. So that's a great milestone for us. The travelling around the world, some of the things that I saw, the people that I met. I remember when I was being raised in the business in Melbourne. And when you work at a 5-star hotel in a place like Melbourne, and you're the only 5-star hotel in the city, it tends to attract all of the celebrities. And dealing with people who are household names in those days, like Rock Hudson, and Sammy Davis Jr., and Rudolph Nureyev, Glenn Ford, and Rod Stewart, all these rock band people, these rock bands that used to stay with us. Amazingly kind and nice people, many of them. Some of them amazingly difficult people. Rod Stewart in particular was a person I had a terrible fight with one night, verbal fight with one night, because he threw butter all around the restaurant which was hitting clients, but that was another story, I guess. And spending time with some of these people, socially or at their concerts, really opened up my eyes to a whole range of different world experiences. Just seeing things that, when you're raised in Geelong and your background's a tomato farm, you thought you'd never see, never associate with these kind of people. The hotel business, I don't know whether anybody in the room is interested in the hotel business, but it's a fascinating business that some people said to me, well, why do you do it? How do you do it? And it does require a lot of passion and common sense. But I did it because I knew I wasn't going to be a doctor. I wasn't going to be a lawyer. I wasn't a university graduate. But it was a skill and a profession that I knew that if you gave it all the passion and time that you could, you'd actually get rewarded by being promoted, and the travel part of it was just an absolute benefit. So I've now been doing it for over 40 years, and I've never regretted it. I did, however, quit the business completely once, and I went back on the land and raised cattle for 6 years. And it was a very good time for our family in Australia, because our young boys turned from boys to men, dealing with animals and machinery. But it didn't take long for me to go back into the hotel business, and we started travelling again. Intercontinental Hotels owns the Holiday Inn brand. It also owns the Crown Plaza brand. And there are 1,500 plus Holiday Inns throughout the world. And I was asked a question today about the image of Holiday Inn in America versus Asia and Europe. And Holiday Inn as a brand has undergone a huge change in the last 3 years. And a lot of people thought that the Holiday Inn brand was sort of that motel level. But in Asia, the hotels are very, very different. They're 5-star hotels. And in 2008, we started a campaign within Intercontinental Hotels and the Holiday Inn brand to upgrade its image, its logo, and its customer experiences both in the room and in the public areas. And we called it Holiday Inn Refresh. And so we took the logo. Some of you may remember the old Holiday Inn logo. We started in 1956 by Clemens Wilson, which is no relation to me, or I'm no relation to him. And we took that logo into the 21st century. And then we looked at the sleep experience and the workspace experience and the bathroom experience and the arrival experience. And we surveyed about 18,000 of our customers to find out truly what people were looking for in a Holiday Inn. And of course we found out through that survey that what people were looking for and what we were offering them were very different, very, very different, particularly in North America. And so we introduced these new brand standards where the type of mattress on the bed had to be exactly the right mattress, a Posturepedic mattress. The sheet had to be 220 thread count with the right mixture of cotton and polyester. The pillows had to be a certain Dow weight. The ergonomic chair at the writing desk had to be a certain size and a certain brand. We even spray scent in the lobby of the Holiday Inn here in Gwangju because we want the hotel to smell nice. So every detail was looked at, and rain showers and adjustable shower heads were put in the bathrooms as another example. The consequence of that was that over 600 hotels dropped out of the system. They left Holiday Inn. They said they weren't going to invest in these changes. And 90% of them were in North America. But as a consequence of raising these standards, we've actually gained back about 800 hotels now into our system. And so that brand, that Holiday Inn brand, has undergone a major transformation, which we hope will be understood by future generations. And now the Crown Plaza brand is about to undertake exactly the same transition. So we're a family of 9 brands in our hotel company. We are the largest hotel company in the world by number of rooms that we supply into the markets. And we have a very powerful presence in China, Southeast Asia, North America, of course, and Europe, growing in Africa, growing in India, very strong in the Middle East, and we have a good presence in Australia and New Zealand, but not a very strong presence. Our future, we have, I think it's the latest count last week was about 180 different hotels in our pipeline that are being built here in the Asia Pacific area. So our company is still expanding. I think our 5-year plan is that we're going to employ over 600,000 people. So our company is growing and our brands are growing. My career now over the last 10 years or 12 years has turned into one that is more of a mechanic, if I can say that. I don't babysit hotels anymore, I do projects, and that's what I like. I open hotels, I rebrand hotels, I renovate hotels, or I, what we call in the industry, deflag hotels. So sometimes we have to take our brand off a hotel and change it around. And so most recently I've been doing those projects in the Philippines and Vietnam, Fiji. I came from Fiji up to here. And of course I came up here to do the opening of the Holiday Inn in Gwangju in August of 2010. And I'm happy to say that I think over the next 18 months we'll have another 3 Holiday Inns in Seoul. And we're just currently working on those management agreements at the moment. But opening the Holiday Inn in Gwangju was, I think, one of the wildest rides I've ever had in opening a hotel. I've never opened a hotel in 4 months. I don't think anybody had. We had an owner that was going at a furious pace to get the hotel open, and I remember coming here. I knew no one. I employed no one. I didn't know where to find anybody, and I was staying at the branded hotel that's down in the Songmu area, which name starts with R. I won't say it out loud. And I was staying down there. I don't speak Korean. My owner doesn't speak English. So it was pretty crazy. And so much so, and the timeline was so tight, that I actually flew in about 6 colleagues from different parts of the world who I knew to help me open the hotel. So one who had a housekeeping discipline, one who had a front office discipline. I flew in an executive chef from the Intercontinental in Seoul down here. And I don't know whether anybody's got any understanding of how to open a hotel. How do you open a hotel? Do you just open the doors and it all happens? Well, it obviously doesn't. You've got to train people, you've got to hire people, you've got to find people, you've got to understand the way they think. Do they have a hospitality heart? Do they have a passion for service, a service ethic? And sometimes that takes a while to find out what they're really like and what they really want. And then you take this raw group of people, many of whom had never had a job before. Virtually none of them, except for some of the leading people, had never worked in a hotel before. And you have to mould them into someone who understands the function that they've got, where that fits in with every other function, someone who understands all about the brand that they're going to work for, what it means, what it stands for. Because one of the things you have to do with Holiday Inn, you can't over-deliver. You can't deliver to a $250 a night room when you're only being paid $100 for it. So there was an enormous amount of training and screening. We had a careers day down at the convention centre, and hundreds of people turned up to it. And we're trying to find 120. And anyway, we put this group of people together. And then the opening was delayed. I think 4 times we went through the opening date. And we finally opened the hotel on December the 10th, 2010. And but that August through December period was 12-hour days, 14-hour days, 16-hour days, sometimes 7 days a week. Systems, testing, computers, test cooking, test tasting, teaching people how to make hotel rooms properly and within a certain period of time. English, brand standards with regards arrival and departure, and teaching people how to use the hotel engine room systems in the computer. Just finding your way around the hotel. Where does this corridor go? What's behind this door? Naming everything. We had a competition to name the restaurant, a competition to name the staff dining room. Choosing uniforms, making sure they arrive on time. Ordering supplies and making sure that everything arrives on time so that when you open a hotel, there are sheets on the bed, there's pillows at the head of it, there's towels in the bathroom, there's shampoo and conditioner, and there's food in the fridge, and people know how to cook it, and people know how to serve it. So it's like this great sort of orchestra, if I can say, that you've got to conduct and bring all these things together at the one time, called December the 10th, as it turned out to be, where you open your doors. And so when I made a speech, one of our great vice presidents, Peter Sutherland, many, many years ago, he wrote a book because he was a specialist about opening hotels. And he wrote a book called Throw Away the Key. Throw Away the Key. Which symbolised when you open the doors of a hotel, when you open it, you never close them. You never lock the doors. The hotel is there 24 hours a day. And so I symbolised Peter's, dedicated my speech to Peter's book. So I had a key made symbolically, and I threw it in a rubbish bin during my speech as part of the opening ceremony. I don't think anybody really understood what I was doing, but that doesn't matter. But to get everything to arrive at that one place, one time, I'm sure you can possibly appreciate it takes a lot of orchestration. And not one person can do it. You've got to have this team that works in harmony, understands the timelines, understands the goals, understands the standards that you've got to achieve, and has the following of all of the employee team members. And so we got open, and you stop and you take your breath and you say, okay, that's phase 1. And of course the next phase is, the owner comes in and says to you, well, now that we've got it open, you've got to fill it. And we want it full tomorrow, by the way. And that's a tough one. You then have got to go out and chase the business. And for the hotel business in Gwangju, it is not growing terribly quickly, I can tell you. The corporate market exists, but it's not necessarily growing. Our hotel is located down by the convention centre, so clearly our future is very linked to the success of the convention centre. And their business is the same for 2013 as it was in 12. So there's not a lot of growth there yet. So we had to go and steal business. The market pie was about this big, it's not growing any bigger, so if you're going to come into the market, you've got to take something from someone. And that doesn't help relationships, because that's what starts price wars. And then you've got to be very careful with the way you deal with those relationships and your pricing position. So it's been an amazing exercise of balance between higher yield, volume, And our hotel this year will close with probably around 55–57% occupancy, which in its second year of trading we feel is very strong. We originally thought it would be in the mid-40s, but it's going to close at about 57, I think. And but the market would not have told us that when we first arrived. There just simply wasn't anything supporting any growth. We've managed now to get wholesalers to come to Gwangju that were bypassing Gwangju and staying in Mokpo. They are now staying in Gwangju, and that was because of our brand and because we offered the right price. Because we had to, because there's nothing worse than an empty room in the hotel. So it's been a very tough fight, and the fight still goes on. I think, in fact, my owner was talking to me this morning, and he said to me, "When do you think we will do 65% occupancy for the year?" And I think he asks me about every 3 weeks because he wants to see if I change my answer. But again, my answer was probably mid-2014. And 65% in our business is considered a strong position to be in. And should be providing for success for everybody that's involved in the hotel. If you manage the hotel tightly with your expenses, 55% can be very profitable as well. I don't know whether you know, but pricing here in Gwangju is a lot less than Seoul. I'm sure many of you have been to Seoul, to the restaurants and bars up there. But in Gwangju, if we can get 30,000 for a buffet lunch or dinner here, in Seoul the same buffet sells for 65,000. But the cost of the produce is the same. So it's a hard fight. The room that we sell down here, we average around 110 to 120,000 won average. The same room will sell in Seoul for 190,000 to 200,000. So you can see there's a very big difference in the market. With the Holiday Inn brand, you've got to run it in a very cost-effective manner. And so your labour charges, for example, are something that you have to watch very, very closely. As I say, I came here in August of 2010 from Fiji, very different place, Fiji. We've had a great time. My wife is a painter, and she did an exhibition in this room here actually just recently. And so we feel quite a strong connection as a family with the Gwangju International Centre, thanks to Minnie. So I'm kind of raving on here a little bit, and I can talk about some of my stories, but some of them I don't know that I should. I could jump all over the place, but has anybody got anything they'd like to ask me?
I can read the questions that were written for you.
Okay.
Can you give our speaker a round of applause, please?
Okay.
So now it's time for the question and answer portion of the talk. If you didn't receive a piece of paper when you first came in, please raise your hand and one of our volunteers will give you one. We ask that you please not raise your hand to ask your question directly. We prefer that you submit it through this format. Okay, so let's get started. First question is, did the absence of a high school and college degree ever work against your favor during your early career?
Not in my early career, no. I found that I was the sort of person, I knew I was disadvantaged from an education point of view. I knew that, and I knew I had to work around that. So every dirty job I volunteered for. I stepped up to every single job that they ever gave me, went and did it, smiled about it. I thought, if I can't get through this way, then I've got no hope. So I found that it didn't disadvantage. I probably just did more dirty jobs than people who were educated.
Is there any place you've been in your travels you never returned to, and why?
Jail. I wouldn't want to return to.
Yeah. Like a certain region.
Yeah. I gotta be careful. You know, I had enough of India. I think it's an extraordinary place, but I just got overwhelmed with the poverty. I couldn't handle all the people around me all the time. And that would be a place that despite the fact that I met my wife there, that would be a place that I would think twice about going back to. I probably should have said no, but that's the truth. That's the truth.
Your wife, is she Australian as well?
No, she's a frog. She's French. She's a frog.
And so she was on that tour as well, or?
No, not allowed to do that. No, she was travelling on her own. She was based in London. She's a frog, French. She was based in London. She was a stewardess working for Saudi Arabian Airlines, and she was travelling in India on her own. Can you believe that? And that's how I met her. That's how my friend at the hotel met her, and then he got in trouble. So.
You were mentioning the job that you stepped up to during your early career. So what other qualities did you need in order to move up in your business?
I think our business requires a lot of common sense. I find here, I find in so many different parts of the world, there is an inability for people to put themselves in the shoes of a guest in order to determine what the real problem is and how to solve it. I find too often people are trying to solve problems on the basis of what their own problems are, rather than stopping and saying, hang on, why is this person yelling at me? Why is this person upset? And one of the key things in our business is you've got to listen to people. You've got to listen to what they're saying. You've got to listen and understand why they're saying it. And I think then and only then can you come back to that guest and make sense. And there are just not enough people in our business who do that, sadly. I think it's a maturity thing, and you would hope that people would learn that as they go on the journey further. But I've found in my travels that the more you do that, the more you are at peace and ease with your customers. Did I answer the question?
Yeah. Which countries or regions of the world do you hope to move in next? Any in particular?
I could move back to the South Pacific tomorrow if they asked me. I love the people of the South Pacific, the Polynesian people, the Melanesian people. They have no concept of time. They are not in a hurry. They don't care what your agenda is, what your pace is. You ask them how far it is down the road. They don't tell you in distance, they tell you in time. And the time is usually related to walking. About half an hour down the road. I'll see you around 9 o'clock. Don't expect them to be there at 9 o'clock. They won't be. They are a gentle, fun-loving race of people. They learn to sing and dance before they learn to walk. They drink a lot. But the South Pacific is great. My equally favourite part of the world is Southeast Asia, and indeed this part. I love Japan, and frankly I love Korea.
You mentioned the days before computers. What are some of the biggest changes in the industry during your tenure?
Oh, computers for sure. The electronic way we run all our engineering today. But computers have revolutionised our business. And not just in the processing part of our business, it's revolutionised our business in the analysis part of it too. We're able to look at our business, our performance metrics, in a completely different manner, and obviously in an instant, whereas before it took days and sometimes weeks to get results to be able to understand what was going on in the business. So computers for sure. And credit cards.
What educational background fits best for working in the hotel business?
Well, you'd have to say your immediate response would have to be someone who's got a hotel or hospitality or tourism degree. But gee, I think that there are many successful people in our business that have come up through the finance discipline. My son, my eldest son, Sebastian, he's got a degree in finance and economics, and he's now what we call a multi-unit manager based in Canberra for our company. And he's the Director of Finance and Business Support for the Canberra Crown Plaza, the Canberra Convention Centre, and the Canberra Government House, where we do all the papering. He will move on to be a general manager. So you can come through the finance discipline. There aren't many chefs that make general managers. There are no chief engineers that make general managers. There are plenty of people who are food and beverage directors who make general managers, and they are normally coming out of the hotel schools. Rooms division managers become general managers, and that's again out of the hotel school. Marketing people, sales people, they talk too much. But a lot of them become general managers as well. I was in the marketing. So, you know, I guess today's business, a degree is expected. I'm just of a different era. I'm 62. So, I think university is past me.
Do you think you'd have the same success in the hotel business if you were a young man today?
I doubt it. I don't know. I think in a fairly old-fashioned way sometimes, and I'd like to think I could, because I see so many young people come into our business who want to be in our business, but I see so many of them leaving it. And the reason they leave it is because they get a university degree. They come to us and say, well, I'm a graduate from one of the famous universities, even here in Gwangju, and I want to be in the hotel business. And then we tell them, well, we've got a job for you starting off in our glass in our all-day dining restaurant. You're going to be a waiter or a waitress. And they kind of go, well, hang on. Where does the degree fit in? And so we find that people just don't last long. And there are a lot of people who graduated from the hotel schools who just have nothing to do with the hotel business anymore. So maybe there is a chance for me because of the dropout rate. I don't have to worry about it.
Could you introduce us to whatever was the most famous episode through your hotel business? So maybe a very memorable experience.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, I can tell you right off the top of my head. One night in Melbourne, I was on the late shift on the front desk, and Sammy Davis Jr. Do you know about Sammy Davis Jr.? Okay. He was performing in Melbourne, and he had to cancel a concert because he had a sore throat. And he was a big smoker, big drinker, and it wasn't my business whether he had a sore throat or not. He cancelled his concert. And I was working on the desk, and there was a restaurant over the road that served roast beef. It was called Charlie Brown's, and he went over there with a group of his friends. They had dinner, and they came back, and they had a lot to drink. And I remember when he came back, he was an extremely friendly person. You know, what's your name? What do you do? Where do you come from? And so, anyway, cut a long story short, he said, have you got a hat over the bell captain's desk? And I said, yeah, I've got one. So I got him a hat, just a normal hat. And he put the hat on and he jumped up and he sat up on top of the reception desk and sang a song. I'll never forget that. Never forget that.
Someone wants to to know what is the most difficult part in the Gwangju hotel business?
Getting the occupancy from 55 to 65. Gee, what is it? I think finding people who really want to work in our business is a difficult part. We've got a lot of young, enthusiastic people, but they do not stay at it, sadly. And I think, yeah, the turnover of staff in that young generation, for me, has been particularly disturbing, to be honest with you. And we have to work harder at making it more appealing. I think it represents physical challenges for young people, standing on their feet for 8 or 9 hours on a hard surface, working in a kitchen. You know, you stand in front of a stove, it's 200 degrees. It's a tough thing for young people to do. And sometimes their legs just give up. So we've got to find better ways to keep people. We can attract people, but we can't keep them in our business.
So you traveled, a lot. What advice would you give to the young people of today that want to make a living traveling the world the way you did?
I guess travel and try and do something that is down the path of what you might see yourself doing later on. I mean, that's what I did. I knew that escorting primarily Americans all over the world was, not that I wanted to go and live in America or start up a travel agency in America, but I wanted to be in the hotel business and I wanted to see the world. And being a guest in a hotel, I didn't really mind whether I took French people all over the world or people from Korea. It doesn't really matter. I wanted to be in the hotel business and I wanted to see what life was like on the other side of the counter. And so that's what I did. If you're chasing a finance career but you want to take a year off and travel, then there's lots of finance jobs, even in hotels, part-time. I don't know whether I'm answering the question well enough or not, but I find whenever you go anywhere, if you really want to find something, you can find it. If you really want to find work, you can go and find it. Be that for a month or 6 weeks or 6 months or whatever it is. But if you can find work that benefits you in the discipline that you're going to pursue in your career later on, so much the better. I think.
Okay, and this is the final question for today. What is your favorite aspect of Korean culture?
True. I just find it enormously refreshing to live in a country where people are so honest, to be honest with you, because everywhere I've lived, if your mobile phone was down somewhere for 5 seconds, it's gone. It's probably been sold in 10 seconds, I don't know. But I think people are very gracious here, and I find that is really a wonderful part of Korean culture. I like barbecue, I think that people here, despite what I might have said or implied, I think some people here have a wonderful work ethic. And I think that would be very hard to duplicate or replace.
How about the soju?
Time to time. I've got an owner who gets right into it, but he has learnt now that I'm not big time on soju. Occasionally.
Okay, so that's the end of the question and answer portion of the talk. Let's give another round of applause to Mr. Michael Wilson.